Welcome, everybody, to ESPN FC Live. We're here 12 p.m.-ish, weekdays every week. Luis Miguel Echegaray, Dalen, Shaka, Hislop. Apologies for being a little late today. Shaka Hislop was doing his laundry, and I think it's still going, Shaka, right?
It's on the spin cycle right now.
His unmentionables are getting worked right now.
Well, listen, Shaka Hislop's delicates are very delicate and important, so we're going to make sure we take care of them. But welcome, everybody, to ESPN FC Live on YouTube, of course, streaming, as I mentioned, 12 p.m. Eastern onwards every week throughout the entire season. Dalen, of course, Shaka Hislop, LME. We'll be talking about the Premier League. We'll also be talking about Lionel Messi, who plays tonight for Inter Miami, as well as some transfer rumors and much more. But we begin with Real Madrid, everybody. Some injury worries, Shaka and Dalen Cuff. Let's show this graphic for everybody, because even though they've won 3 games straight in the beginning of La Liga, this is an extensive absentee list. Of course, we know about Thibaut Courtois out for the season. Eder Militao, a significant part of the defensive unit for Carlo Ancelotti, out for the season as well. Mendy returns this week. Dani Ceballos returns this week. Arda Güler, the young, talented Turkish attacker, out for 4 weeks. And Vinicius Jr., the most significant of that list, out for 4 weeks, hopefully in time for El Clásico, which you can watch here on ESPN Plus later in October. Shaka, let's begin with you. This is a big list. Who does it worry you when you look at this for Real Madrid? Do you think they'll be out of it as long as it's the beginning of the season? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit worrying for a couple of reasons. Let's keep in mind that Real Madrid finished second to Barcelona last season, lost Karim Benzema in the off-season, brought in Jude Bellingham, who started unbelievable. I don't think anybody expected Jude Bellingham to be as good as he has been straight out the traps, and thankfully so for Real Madrid. But you lose Vinicius Jr., who has been easily Real Madrid's most creative player over the last couple of seasons, and in the absence of Benzema, you felt even more would be asked of him, and albeit that is for the shorter term. Also, and maybe I'm showing my bias a little bit here, but Thibaut Courtois, who I think has established himself to be the best goalkeeper in the world over the last 12 or 18 months, probably a little bit longer than that, being out for the rest of the season, that is very significant. I'm not sure how you replace a goalkeeper of that quality, especially when you look back, not last season, but the season before, when Real Madrid won both the league and Champions League. I thought, and again, I might be in the minority here, I thought Thibaut Courtois was Real Madrid's most valuable player, particularly in those last 3 or 4 months. So that, for me, is a significant blow.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Thibaut Courtois is probably the biggest absentee there, aside from obviously Karim Benzema winning all those awards and arguably one of the greatest goalkeepers, if not the best goalkeeper in the world. Dalen, when you look at that list, Real Madrid, it's early in the season. They have Getafe this weekend. You would think that they could do it. Jude Bellingham, of course, is doing his thing. 4 goals already for Los Blancos. But do you worry? Do you think they should be a little bit more aggressive before the end of the transfer window?
Well, Carlo Ancelotti said they're not going to be. And if they stick to that, I was a little surprised. I mean, Shaka, you can puff out your chest as a member of the goalkeeper union. Yeah, losing Courtois it's a huge deal. That's not biased. That's a fact, man. And then when you think about this, it's Vinny Jr. and Thibaut Courtois. Are you going to argue 2 of the best 3 players in terms of a wide attacking player and a goalkeeper in the world? Like they may be 2 of the 3 best guys in their respective positions, and to take them out of a lineup and one for the entire season is a huge problem. I always look at things through the lens of the odds. You guys know that. Real Madrid is still the favorite to win this. That's really because Barcelona dropped points in their opener. They're at 7 points and Madrid is at 9. Those 2, almost unlike any league in top 5 league, in terms of just those 2 results are the only thing that move the odds, it seems. Even injuries don't tend to move the odds. It really is those 2 teams and how they perform relative to one another. All that said, I'm interested to see how Ancelotti adjusts a little bit. When you lose, this team was already kind of narrow. How they find width and creativity from the wide flanks with losing Vinny's going to be interesting. Bellingham's been great. Ancelotti also said, hey, we're good on the offensive side of the ball. We've scored 6 goals. Well, Jude Bellingham's gotten 4 of them. I'm out of an attacking midfield position. Like they need to have guys up top that can score. So I have a lot of questions, a lot of concerns. I always say both ends of the pitch now. And you mentioned Getafe, but then they have international break. You got Real Sociedad, who's not started well, but obviously finished in the top 4 last year. You have Atleti, who they crushed Rayo the other day. I don't know what that means, but they are still in the mix there at top of the table and will probably beat the rest of the season. So they have 2 of their most formidable opponents potentially in that window where Vinny's gone, and you mix in Champions League games. So this is going to get thick and fast throughout September. So this is definitely a concern.
Go ahead, Shaka, jump in as we close up on Real Madrid, because one thing that I think we also have to mention is that the Champions League will return as well, and things will get tougher as the months go along. I actually thought, Shaka, it was really weird not to try and replace Karim Benzema with it doesn't have to be a Benzema replica, but Real Madrid always needs that number 9, right? As Dalen said, despite the Jude Bellingham goals. What do you think?
Listen, I wonder how much is that just keeping room for Kylian Mbappe. Now, I've said here, I think I've said on one of these episodes that we do, that my belief is that Kylian Mbappe was not going to move during the summer transfer window, and I know we've got 24 hours left before that slam shut, and at least half of my prediction will come true. The other half to that is I think Real Madrid make a fresh approach. I think he moves come January, and right now I know, well, as far as I'm aware, not too many people discussing that. Whenever a transfer window reopens, Kylian Mbappe just seems to be a topic of discussion, whether he wants it or not. But I kind of feel that that's the more likely or most likely of the scenarios surrounding Kylian Mbappe. Now, whether that proves to be a mistake in hindsight, with that big void left on the left with Vinicius' injury, time will tell. But I still feel there's a lot of time. It's a long season. Real Madrid won't be judged by what happens in the group stages of the Champions League. I know we haven't seen that draw yet, but I expect Real Madrid to get out of the group stages just because they're Real Madrid. And then back end of the season is when it gets really meaningful in Spanish football. You just don't want to let anybody, be it Atleti, be it Barcelona, get too much of a gap, but those gaps can be closed in the second half of the season. So it's not by any means doom and gloom in terms of the injury list or the likelihood of them lifting silverware.
Of course, a lot of this depends if they stay healthy and they don't lose anybody else. And they'll be looking at this packed schedule, as the guy said, regarding European competition. Speaking of Kylian Mbappe and all that telenovela drama and the transfer rumors, well, we're getting closer and closer to the end of the transfer window, which obviously the end will be from September 1st, and more clubs, including in the Premier League, making some action reacting actively to some injuries that they may have suffered during the beginning of the season. Of course, that includes Manchester City, the treble winners from last season. Kevin De Bruyne, of course, out for a significant portion of the time, meaning that it looks now Matheus Nunes, the Portuguese star from Wolverhampton Wanderers, looking like it's going to happen. A move, 55 million euros around that time, to go to the side of Manchester. You would think that it's a replacement for De Bruyne, but there's another creative component there for City as Nunes leaves Wolves and heads over to City. Dalen, let's begin with you. Your thoughts just regarding this move and this amount, because it is significant.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there was the talk about Paqueta earlier in the transfer window, maybe for 100 million. So that's when you look at the price of this, is maybe more aligned with what City wanted to spend. I know they came in a little bit lower and they found themselves here in the mid 50 millions. Well, when you think about where Pep always seems to do this, like he will heap praise on players, and he did it last year in Nunes' direction and eventually wanted him to come around. They needed somebody to replace KDB. You know, there's no one-to-one replacement. That guy is otherworldly. He's, again, one of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world, in terms of being an attacking, creative midfielder and what he can do with the ball and the passes he picks and the vision and how much he can make things go for City. That said, Nunes is a very good young player. He hasn't really scored much. I think he has one goal in the Premier League, but that may be more of a function of playing with Wolves and a team that has its own struggles offensively. If you put him in with this group of players, will he be able to be KDB? No. But will he be able to provide another attacking option in the midfield that needs some reinforcements given the injuries they've had? Yeah, so I'm not surprised by the move. I think it was necessary. We'll see if he, with this plethora of players around him that are at a whole different level, what he can bring to that City team.
You like it, Shaka?
I'm a little bit confused. I'll be honest with you. And while Pep Guardiola is Pep Guardiola and he gets to make these decisions and see things in players that nobody else does, certainly that I don't. It's a little bit confusing to me. And Darren mentioned the link with Paqueta. Again, if I were West Ham, I would have snapped City's hand off at 65 million. Never mind, push it all the way to 100. And then that kind of fell apart, given some of the off-the-field issues, shall we call them. And then the link with Nunes. And now Pep Guardiola has praised Nunes. This is going back many a year to when City played Sporting in the Champions League, where Pep kind of was full of praises for his performance then, even though it was a bit of a one-sided thrashing. I don't get it. And while you can look at the likes of Grealish, who cost north of or just about 100 million, it took him a year to settle into what Pep was being asked for. Riyad Mahrez, who was the club record signing even before that, it took him a year to settle in before understanding exactly what Pep wanted and to have a significant role in that City team. I guess the counter to that is Akanji, who'd been heavily criticized during his time at Dortmund, came into the City team and has simply been outstanding. So maybe this is closer to my own opinion of Akanji and how he's transformed, but I just don't see it with Nunes. Again, Pep will prove me wrong more times than not. So he's earned that. He's earned that right to spend this kind of money in bringing in those players.
He most definitely has. All right, let's move on. Staying in the Premier League, Chelsea, Mauricio Pochettino's Chelsea get their first win in the Premier League against Luton last weekend. Moises Caicedo has been added, of course, some historic transfer fees right there. But apparently, the moves keep on coming, at least this transfer window, because there's a talk of possibly knocking on the door of Barcelona for either Ferran Torres or Rafinha, or maybe both. Who knows when it comes to Chelsea. Shaka, back to you. Do you like either of them? One of them? Do you think this is what Chelsea needs? I mean, Raheem Sterling's looking good. Possibly they need more help. Mudrik's injury. What do you think? Ferran Torres, Rafinha, both? What do you reckon?
Right, listen, I think Chelsea's main issue is an out-and-out goal scorer. And while they may have found that in Nicholas Jackson, I've said all along from pre-season, I thought his kind of rawness and inexperience would have been you'd have seen the best of him with Nkunku sitting in behind. Yes, he got injured, but still, I don't think Nicholas Jackson, or I don't think there's a need to have Nicholas Jackson as your only striker. Find somebody you could play as one of a front two, and maybe that player is Ferran Torres, who can play through the middle. Yes, he played out wide for Barcelona more times than not, but even when he plays centrally, I'm not sure if Ferran Torres is as much of a finisher in that regard. So again, it makes little sense for me in terms of that striker that's needed, whether it's Rafinha, who can play either flank. But again, Chelsea have a lot of players through midfield. They have players who can play out wide. Their main target, again, for me, is a goal scorer, somebody who can play as an out-and-out striker. If Nicholas Jackson goes down, somebody who can play as a partner to Jackson. But I'm not sure that Ferran Torres is the answer for either of those.
Yeah, I'm with you, Shaq. I think it's the profile of the player is what they're looking for. The two options there don't really fit the profile of the player I think they need, to echo what you just said. Now, and the challenge, too, is whether it's Mudryk or Nkunku, well, the injury is more long-term, but you're still going to have these guys eventually come back. And this was the challenge with Chelsea last year. Such a big roster. You're going to have these guys come back that are replicative of a very similar player profile. So I understand they're probably going to make that move because that's what Todd Boehly has done. And in all honesty, I've heard the word amortization more in the last 5 weeks than I have in the last 39 years of my life. So we will continue to hear that discussion as people want to understand how they're making this move. I think in Barcelona, either way, if they could get one of the two or both of them off their books, very good thing for them as they still want to get João Cancelo signed. There's a whole other thing about João Felix, which I don't agree with that, but they want to get that in there too. Like they want to do some business as well. So Barcelona as a motivated seller in this situation, and Chelsea's a motivated buyer. I just don't think this is going to answer their need and their question for somebody to put the ball in the back of the net consistently and play through the middle. But I feel like they're going to make one or both moves because that's what they do.
Can I also add here about Chelsea? I mean, 3 or maybe 4 weeks ago, I was looking at their transfer business, and I thought, this really is a different look to Chelsea. It seemed as though, and okay, Saudi Arabia comes along and takes a number of players off their hands, and they get good prices for that. And then Mount goes to Manchester United. City comes in for Kovacic. And it really looked like Chelsea were approaching this as you would expect a club to approach. Mind you, a club that spent over £500 million over the last 12 months, still didn't qualify for Champions League, so they would have to kind of figure out how things would work financially, and then that dreaded amortization kind of kept getting floating around. I'm going into the bank and ask for a mortgage, and I'm just gonna. When they ask me how I'm going to pay for this, I'm going to just say, just ask Todd Bowley. Whatever Todd Bowley did.
Just bring on Todd.
Just yell amortization. Amortization. Just
that's how I'm going to pay for my mortgage for my 15-bedroom castle. I don't know right now, but somehow it works for other people. But anyway, 4 weeks ago, it looked like Chelsea were getting their house in order, and then all of a sudden, it just seemed like the old Chelsea back again. I can't fault Chelsea for their pursuit of somebody like Caicedo. If he becomes available, yes, you want to be in the market for them. But was there really a need for Lavia? Was there a need for so many of the other signings? And again, we're having that same discussion yet again. Is it really a need, given some of their financial constraints, for Rafinha, for Ferran Torres? I'm not sure it makes them significantly better.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talent going in, but the metal, the sustainability within the squad is a little bit worrying. Speaking, by the way, of outgoings of Chelsea, Dalen, I'll ask you, and Shaka, you jump right in because we're getting those questions in. Thank you, everybody. Keep sending them to Shaka, Hislop, Dalen Cuff, and LME. But here's one for you regarding staying with Chelsea and some outgoings. You mentioned some outgoings previously there, Shaka, but here's another one. Romelu Lukaku to Roma. Is Mourinho, Dalen, and Lukaku a good mix to get him back on track? What do you think?
I don't know if I'm more tired of Mourinho or Lukaku conversation. I don't know which one, but they're very, very high.
You can be quick on it. Don't worry about it.
I will be quick on it. I think Lukaku, we haven't seen him at his best in years. It's been years, but we continue to talk about him because of the player he was at the club level, but also he had some great years, good tournaments at the international level as well when healthy. That's long in the past. If he reunites with Mourinho, yes, can he be effective on a Roma team that needs some help, to say the least? Potentially. But I don't think that team is going to factor at the top of the Serie A. And it's, in the end, two guys that have had and done great things in their careers. And Mourinho, the described special one. It's been a long time since we've seen special stuff from either one of them.
Shaka, very quick on Lukaku and Mourinho. What do you think?
Listen, I like Lukaku as a player. I like a lot of what he brings in terms of physicality, in terms of being direct. I think his hold-up play is also very, very good. Question marks about his finishing, absolutely. But given his role for Inter Milan over the last couple of seasons, you understand an Italian club, and in this case Roma, wanting to take that chance. While I have been first to defend Lukaku in just about every single thing, the last few months have left me totally bemused. I thought he was happy. He was settled at Inter Milan. Certainly had a wonderful partnership going alongside Lautaro Martinez, who I thought was outstanding the other day against Cagliari. But anyway, I digress. Why you upset that in pursuit of Juventus? I thought if he was going to kind of given his experiences at Manchester United, surely he understands the value of wanting to feel needed, of feeling appreciated. And Inter Milan gave him that, his experiences at Manchester United and Chelsea. Inter Milan gave him, I thought, everything that he wanted. Even after some of the disappointments, both in a Belgium jersey and the Champions League final, I thought the Inter Milan fans stood by him. Why you go and mess with that is simply beyond me. If you mess with that to go to Saudi Arabia for an extra zero on top of your weekly wage, I can sympathize with that. But to go to Juventus, that didn't make any kind of sense to me at all. So good luck to him, but the last month or two has left me a little bit frustrated with Romelu Lukaku.
Romelu Lukaku's biggest enemy, Romelu Lukaku. And that's all you have to say about that. Let's move on here regarding the Premier League. Let's talk about some action before the international break comes in. Of course, everything happening this weekend, including Arsenal against Manchester United. Arsenal, who came off a disappointing 2-2 draw against Fulham, and Manchester United coming back from 2-0 down to beat Forest last weekend, though both of them have not started to what their managers would have hoped for, Mikel Arteta and Erik ten Hag, respectively. Shaka, let's begin with you. Arsenal, Manchester United, historically speaking, reputation-wise, can be a good one, but it can also be a really boring game. But both of these teams have not started that well. What do you expect?
Listen, Arsenal at home, I don't think Arsenal have started that well. I don't think they need me to tell them that. I think what has hurt them is their inability, or at times it feels like an unwillingness to kill games off, to just kind of see things out. That I don't think is needed and keeps teams in games. And while you can look at Fulham as an example of that, yes, they gave Fulham a rather ridiculous early start. Again, I don't think at any point over the last 3 years we've been able to say Bukayo Saka played a really poor ball up until now. So you take that for what it is. But you get yourselves back in front. And I just don't think that Arsenal at any point kind of, at that point in taking the lead, kind of force their superiority over Fulham. And at one with one goal in it, you keeping the opponent in it. And Fulham gets a point, deservedly or undeservedly. That's for others to decide. And that's my big issue with Arsenal, that at times they look good. At times Arteta has tried to force Havertz down our throats. We'll get to that. But more to the point, I think for as good as Arsenal are, they haven't been able or willing to kill teams off. Counter that with a Manchester United, who I think have had some good fortune on their side. Yes, I'm thinking of that Wolves result. Have maybe been unlucky. Yes, I'm thinking about that Spurs result and the no call on Romero. But all in all, I don't think Manchester United have at all looked good this season. Again, so much is being asked of Marcus Rashford, and while he carried Manchester United in the last half of last season, particularly after the World Cup, I think it's unfair to expect that again of him. And they simply haven't strengthened in a way and in the positions that they need to. And as a result, Manchester United again looking a shadow of who we expect them to be. I say that, but I hear Mark Ogden saying in my ear, Manchester United as a club today are nowhere near the club that we remember them to be.
With that, Dalen Cuff, what do you expect this weekend then, Dalen, the Arsenal fan Cuff? And give me some odds as well in this game, because given from everything that Shaka just said, which is very true, neither are perfect, both are vulnerable, both looking for something. What do you expect?
First of all, I expect to be overserved. I'll be there, fellas. I'll be there in section 15. Let's go.
Nice.
I will be at the match. I cannot wait. What I expect is hopefully a better performance, because Shaka, you summed it all up there. And as an Arsenal fan, the difference was after that Crystal Palace result, when you go down a man, and they did see out that game, and they find a way to win 1-0, not in a good performance, but you're down a man. It's some of the things that they haven't done in years past, because consistently win ugly. It was an ugly game, wasn't a good performance, but they found a way to win on the road, down a man the last 30-some minutes or so. Then you're up a man at home, up a goal. That was the puzzling piece to me. Like, there's got to be like a go for the jugular mentality that the team just didn't show. There wasn't like, we're going to put our foot to the metal, we're going to dominate this game, and we're going to take over and win the game. It was sounded like Newcastle had the same problem. It was like almost like we're going to see this out, but we're up a man, up a goal at home. Like that was concerning, and also concerning. We'll get to Havertz in a second, but from a tactical perspective, as soon as they put Zinchenko on, they took Havertz off. Vieira went in the middle. They kind of looked like they did more of last year, with Zinchenko going to the midfield and Partey came off as a right back and Ben White went out there. They looked more tactically like they did last year. They looked more comfortable and they looked better, and that helped kind of turn the tide of that game in the second half. And ultimately, they didn't win the game, but they looked better going forward and getting and being productive and getting goals and getting some scoring opportunities before, like I said, the last 15 minutes or so just did not have the desire to continue to play on the front foot for some reason, it seemed. Now, This is the concern. Do you try to continue to evolve like he has early in the season when it hasn't looked good, or do you revert back to what hasn't worked last year and seemed to work as far as tactical perspective in the last match? I hope to see that. I think they're better in that way. If Zinchenko gets to full health, he adds something different coming out of left back spot and into the midfield. And now we can go to Havertz because I think that is a huge issue in terms of where he is in the field, in terms of lack of being able to finish or putting himself in positions. Arteta believes in him. I don't know if he believes himself. Seems like a very not confident player that like he should have made a run the other day. And he takes 2 more steps. Their ball comes right across 6. He's a goal. He just stopped his run. Like there's little things that he's just not doing. And at times he could turn and go and attack the defense and he's passing backwards. He just looks out of sorts.
Well, speaking of Kai Havertz and the criticism on Kai Havertz and the fact that it nearly cost £70 million to get into Arsenal, here's a very own Craig Burley with some thoughts about Kai Havertz. I'll give you 2 guesses to see where he went with this one. Check it out.
There is nothing in this Kai Havertz performance or performances that suggests this player is any different, not one iota, than the player that was performing for Chelsea. The only difference is he's wearing a red shirt. He's still got no confidence. He's still not influencing games. He's still giving the ball away. He's still not getting in the correct positions at the right time. He made 1 or 2 good runs in the first half. But at the moment, there's a £70 million burning problem in Arteta's pocket because he's, in my opinion, Dan, he's going to have to drop him. Arsenal are a better side without him in the team and Trossard, but Havertz is he's the elephant in the room because he was big money and he came from a rival in Chelsea. If Mikel Arteta wants to put Arsenal's best 11 on the field next time they play, it involves Kai Havertz being on the bench because he's not gained his confidence back. We're not seeing anything different from him. In fact, he's a passenger at the moment in this Arsenal side, and they don't need passengers because Man City don't have passengers, and they're the team to catch.
Preach.
Shaka, I agree, and Dalen, but Shaka, I'll come to you first. I agree with Craig's point, but the elephant in the room was not an elephant that decided to voluntarily go in there. Like Arsenal brought them in, £70 million. Arteta, I spoke to him in the summer. He spoke very highly of him and what he can do. Is part of this problem Arteta's problem on just the way he's utilizing him, or is it all on Kai Havertz?
No, it's Arteta's problem. It was Arteta who sanctioned this move, as far as we can tell, given everything that he said. It was Arteta who praised Kai Havertz and as to how good a footballer he is. It was Arteta who picked up his starting lineup on the first day of the season and played him I think he played him for the full 90 minutes. And I don't remember him doing anything on that day either. Listen, I understand. And again, I said similarly about Pep Guardiola earlier in this broadcast. Sometimes managers see things in players that I don't get. And I never got this one and absolutely still do not. But in my opinion, it was clear that it wasn't working. It wasn't working in the Community Shield. Then don't play him. Don't start him. Let him come off the bench. Let him figure out his role in this team. Let him figure that role out on the training ground. And let him figure that out on the training ground and then include him slowly but surely. But it almost felt, and maybe I'm being unfair to Mikel Arteta here, but it almost felt like because of the criticism, his position was, I'm going to show you exactly what I see in Arteta. And regardless of how he plays, I'm going to praise his performance and I'm going to keep picking him. When it was clear to most anyway, that what Arteta was bringing to Arsenal certainly wasn't making them any better, and I think was keeping them back an awful lot.
Shaq, I totally agree. The one thing I would add too is I think Arteta's a great manager. I'm happy he's the manager of the club that I support. That said, real leadership, sometimes you have to look yourself in the mirror, and because you thought something on Monday, it may need to be different in 2 or 3 weeks. He has to be willing to adjust. If he continues to put him out there and performances are like this, you have to be willing to pull him, and your pride and your hubris cannot factor into it. And that does seem to be a little bit of a factor right now.
It's so simple. You need a spine to be a true competitor, a great center back defensive unit, a great midfielder, and a clinical striker. Arsenal has 2 out of 3. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about Lionel Messi, who plays tonight for Inter Miami against Nashville SC. This has been a tremendous journey. To understate it would be ridiculous because it really has been that amazing. They have 11 matches, everybody, to make it to the playoffs. They're 11 points away from the 9th spot place, and it all begins, well, it all actually began last weekend against the Red Bulls, but it continues against Nashville, then LAFC, the World Cup qualifying break, and then much more. So let's get to it before we wrap up. Dalen, let me go to you first. Can Lionel Messi, Inter Miami, do this? 11 games left, 11 points away from the 9th place spot. Can they make it to the MLS playoffs?
Well, yeah, by the odds, they're the second favorite to win the whole freaking thing. Like, so, I mean, Vegas has kind of lost their mind in that regard. But this is, again, you're in Vegas, you're trying to make your money. They got the big buildings there for a reason. They know the Americans are on board with Messi. They want to make this bet, albeit a little bit of a long shot for him, not just to make the playoffs, but to win the whole thing. In terms of actually getting there, yes, I think they've got to get to, I think if you look at the last couple of years, about 43 points is the threshold to get there. They need to win, I think, about 8 of their last 11 games to feel comfortable about being over that number, given where they're at right now. That said, Nashville tonight actually helps Nashville. They've played them already. Maybe the awe will be gone. We've talked about this before. It seems like there's an awe factor, and rightfully so, whether it's the referees before the match or in game and before the game and after the game. There is an awe and a kind of a reverence to Messi being on the pitch with these guys. Maybe this will be different. And not only did they lose, they lost in their home field and they lost a cup final, Nashville did. So this may help them, at least from a mentality standpoint, be ready to go, be looking at it differently. Obviously, Messi, too, coming off the bench in Harrison, New Jersey against Red Bulls. We'll see where he factors in terms of starting lineup and his body. LAFC, it's a trip further away next up. And then obviously the international break, and he's got to be going to South America. So there's a lot on his plate. I'm just going to root for him as a fan. I'd like to see them get there because it keeps it more interesting, keeps it more fun. Let's just say this. I'm not betting on it, though. We're not putting any shekels on this, but I'm hoping it happens.
Well, I think the entire MLS is hoping that they make it to the playoffs. I think it would be significant. But Shaka, here's the other component to all of this. And to Dalen's excellent points about, obviously, can it happen? Will it happen? Not forgetting the fact that, after LAFC, Shaka, he's off to Argentina for World Cup qualifiers. So that September 9th game, it's not just him, but Joseph Martinez, Leo Campana, Benjamin Cremashi might make it to the USMNT camp calendar. So they're going to be missing some people for one game already. And then who knows what could happen after the World Cup qualifiers. So the schedule is also an issue, right? Like making sure that they don't just rely on Messi, because this is a team game after all.
Of course. And that always is the issue for so many teams in MLS who have these international players. And you take that kind of talent out of any team, you're going to suffer. And I don't think that comes as any kind of surprise. So that game where they're missing, it's more about managing the performance and the result than it is about going into it with any kind of expectation. That being said, I know we've labeled Lionel Messi a magician, and rightly so, for his individual brilliance. But I think one of the things about Lionel Messi that I have come to, well, I maybe recognize is that I think he's part hypnotist. Who? I look at Inter Miami and somebody has hypnotized that entire dressing room and convinced them that they're prime Barcelona. This is not, and I think the big difference between
into my eyes, Cremashi. You're going to be Rui Costa for the rest of the season.
The big difference between Inter Miami of the last game or two and Inter Miami of the first game or two with Lionel Messi is you could see back then all eyes were on Messi. How can we get him? And he didn't disappoint. Now all of a sudden, everybody in those pink shirts are playing like absolute ballers. When did this happen? This was a team that couldn't string 3 passes together 4 weeks ago. Now all of a sudden it's flicks and tricks, and the team are playing with us absolute swagger. So I say all that to say that this Inter Miami team continues to get better and better. Now time will tell whether they left it a little bit too late, and yes, it's a big gap to make up in a little bit of games, but it's not insurmountable, certainly not to this version of Inter Miami. And then how you manage those results, whether that spell is broken when those players are away, again, we will wait to see. But whichever way, sit back and enjoy this, because all of a sudden this is about a lot more than just, well, maybe it is still the Lionel Messi show, but it is more than just the Lionel Messi, the magician show, but Lionel Messi, the hypnotist show.
Look into my eyes, everybody. The show is over. Shaka can get his laundry finally. Dalen's flight to London will be delayed.
Let's go. No, we can't have that.
No, absolutely not. He'll have an absolutely great time, and so will we. Shaka, Hislop, Dalen, Kaf, Luis Miguel Echegaray, thank you so much for being here. Make sure that to follow us on YouTube, of course, social and digital channels. We are back as well on Friday, and Premier League action, and as we mentioned earlier on, La Liga exclusively on ESPN Plus, as well as the Bundesliga, by the way, some hurricane action maybe for your liking. Shaka, Hislop, Dalen, Kaf, LME, have a fantastic rest of your week, and we will see you next time. Till then, you're falling asleep.
I don't need to be.